Good morning. I'm going to call to order this regular meeting of the Zoning and Planning Committee for Thursday, January 10th. My name is Jeremy Schrader, and I am the chair of this committee. With me at the dais are Councilmember Ellison, Councilmember Wright, Councilmember Goodman, and Councilmember Gordon. Let the record reflect that we have a quorum. We have 17 items on the agenda for today, including a public hearing continued from our final meeting of 2018 and 4 quasi-judicial hearings. We'll begin with the consent agenda, which is items number 6 through 17. Number 6 is the referring to staff on an intentional communities and cluster development ordinance. Number 7 is the rezoning application for Lutheran Social Services at 2200 and 2201 Fremont Avenue North. Number 8 is the rezoning application from DJR Architecture at 934 and 938 15th Avenue Southeast. Let the record reflect I've been joined by the Council President Bender. Items number 9 and 10 are the rezoning applications submitted by Daniel Overpiller for the properties located at 2637, 2645 First Avenue South, as well as and at 1101 Hennepin Avenue East. Item number 11 is the rezoning application for Yellow Tree Corporation at 2325 East 38th Street and 3812 24th Avenue South. Item number 12 is the rezoning application from CA Ventures for 1202, 1206, 1208, 1214 4th Street Southeast, as well as 316 12th Avenue Southeast. Item number 13 is a right-of-way vacation application submitted by Catholic Charities at 165, 173, and 177 Glenwood Avenue. Item number 14 is the commemorative street name addition of Dr. Floyd R. Beecham Street to 4th Street North between Broadway and 21st Avenue North. Item number 15 is the approval of 2 appointments to the Heritage Preservation Commission, Kimberly Sandboot and Jesse Kling. Item number 16 is the approval of 4 appointments to the Arts Commission, Heather Hoagland, Robin Robinson, Crystal Brinkman, and Lisa Midday. Item number 17 is the setting of a public hearing for our January 24th meeting to consider 3 appointments to the Zoning Board of Adjustments. Are there any questions or comments from committee members at this time, or would you like to pull anything off for discussion? Not seeing any, and before we take a vote on these items, I'd like to check if any of the potential appointees to the Heritage Preservation Commission or the Arts Commission are here today, and I'd certainly like to give them the opportunity to speak if they're willing, and also thank them very much for their service to the city. All right, come on up.
Hello, my name is Jesse Kling.
Oh, thanks so much for coming today.
Thank you. So from June 2017 to September 2018, I served as survey and inventory technician with the Minnesota State Historic Preservation Office, where I worked in managing the digital inventory of all historic properties in the state. Previously, between June 2016 and May 2017, I interned with the St. Paul Heritage Preservation Commission, both researching and documenting the city's historic structures and landscapes. This included not only identifying potential historic sites, but also regularly attending the HPC's public hearings and business meetings. This internship took place while I was a student at Macalester College, where I majored in geography, with particular interest in historical and cultural geography. Currently, I am working as a freelance consultant in historic preservation. Most recently, I have been working with landscape research on their Miriam Park Reconnaissance Survey in St. Paul. The positions I've held in the Twin Cities preservation sphere have made it clear to me that I want to work in preservation long term, and I have developed a strong passion for the cause of preservation in the city of Minneapolis. As a resident of the city with a zeal for local history, architecture, and urban design, I have spent a great deal of time learning about Minneapolis's history and architecture and exploring the city's urban landscape. This is a pivotal time for preservation in this city, not only because of the challenges and opportunities posed by the city's continuing growth, but also because of the sheer number of ways historic preservation can be used to make for a more socially equitable and inclusive Minneapolis. For a young person like me, serving on the HPC would be an unparalleled opportunity, and I have the determination, passion, and background knowledge to succeed at it. I want to make sure that the preservation initiatives Minneapolis takes in the future reflect the needs of the diverse communities that make up the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kling. Thank you so much for being here today, and thank you for lending your expertise to the city.
Of course.
With that, I'd like to move items 6 and 17 through 17 for approval. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the motion carries. We'll now move on to item number 1, which is a public hearing regarding the application submitted by Doran CMSM for an interim use permit to allow a temporary commercial surface parking lot on the property located at 311 2nd Street Southeast for a period lasting until December 7th, 2023. This public hearing was opened at our last meeting of 2018 and was continued to today's meeting. Before I reopen the hearing, I'll ask for a staff presentation.
Good morning, committee members. Peter Crandall, Senior Planner with CPED Land Use. I'll be brief because we went over this at our last meeting, but this is an application for an interim use permit to establish a commercial surface parking lot at 311 2nd Street Southeast. This is the former General Mills Riverside Technical Facility that is currently being planned for redevelopment by the applicant. As it is a somewhat large-scale redevelopment, the applicant is seeking to convert what is currently a accessory parking lot to the existing technical facility into a commercial lot so that it can be used to serve the neighborhood while the rest of the site is redeveloped. They're seeking an interim use permit for up to 5 years while the site is under redevelopment. I can take any questions, and the applicant's also here to answer questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff? All right, not seeing any questions. Thank you, Mr. Crandall. Now I'll give the applicant a chance to speak if they're here.
Good morning, Chair and committee members. My name is Cody Dietrich, and I'm with Doran Companies, Bloomington. I just want to thank Peter for his staff report and say that we generally agree with what is proposed in the staff report and for approval and the recommendation. In the future, we're planning to redevelop this site. Is there? Oh, okay. Okay. In the future, the plan will be to redevelop this site. And as part of that planning process, we met with the neighborhood and different committees, and the concern has been about parking in the neighborhood. So as this is going through the different phases, and it'll take some time to build this, it'll be a benefit to add this to the neighborhood so they have some additional parking for the area. Otherwise, I'll just put this here. The parking lot in question will just sit vacant for the next few years. So this will provide that benefit that the neighborhood's looking for, at least in the temporary purpose. So that's all I have.
No, thank you. All right, with that, I will reopen the public hearing. Was there anyone here to speak? Anyone here to speak? All right, with that, seeing no one, I'll now close the hearing, and I will move number 1 for approval. Is there any discussion? All right, not seeing any. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the motion carries. I'm actually going to change, if that's all right with the clerk, move on to number 3, because of in light of what's been happening, if that's all right with all my committee members. Okay, I'd like to move on to number 3 next, which is the consideration of appeal submitted by Gary Dawkins regarding the Zoning Board of Adjustment's decision to uphold the determination of zoning administrator to deny a building permit at 1100 Franklin Avenue East. And if there can be a very short staff presentation, just because there's a staff recommendation to continue this to the next meeting.
Yes, thank you, council members. Kimberly Holine with Zoning Administration. So the item before you is an appeal of the zoning administrator that was sent to the Board of Adjustment. The Board of Adjustment upheld the staff recommendation and denied the appeal. So this is an appeal of that appeal that's before you on this agenda today. Staff is requesting that we do a 1-cycle continuance to the January 24th Zoning and Planning Committee meeting just to take a look at some additional information on this application.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff? All right, not saying any, I just want to apologize to my committee members. I like to run with the agenda, but it's something that I know that we're going to continue, and the next item might take a little longer, so I just wanted to go on that. And just wanted to thank you very much, and want to see if there are any members of the public here to speak on this item, knowing that this will be continued to the next cycle. All right, seeing that, I move to continue this hearing to our next meeting scheduled for January 24th, 2019. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the item has been continued to our next meeting. And now we'll go back to number 2, which is consideration of appeals submitted by United Properties for the development located at 30 South 3rd Street. And we will begin with the staff presentation.
This isn't looking good. Okay. Well, I brought paper copies, so. Out of memory, I'm not sure what that means exactly. I'm going to go old school, so I apologize. This is the Gateway Mixed-Use Development Appeal. The project site is at 30 South 3rd Street. The applicant is proposing to construct a new vertically stacked mixed-use development on the site that would include approximately 533,000 square feet of Class A office space, 280 hotel rooms, 22 dwelling units, all atop a floor podium containing lobbies for the office, hotel, and residential components, retail space, meeting and function rooms, and service spaces for all of those different uses. There will also be 455 parking spaces located on 3 levels of underground parking. And there will be a plaza anchoring the corner of Washington and Nicollet Mall. And that plaza has been designed to accommodate a future streetcar line. So to orient everyone to the site, Hennepin Avenue is up and Washington is to the right. This is that plaza space, and you can see here and in some of the other drawings I'll show you will show the plazas, or the delineation for the future streetcar line that is being planned as part of the project. This is 3rd Street and then Nicollet Mall, and you can see the orange is retail space, and then there is a branch bank here. This is the office lobby, the hotel lobby in the middle, and then the residential lounge and entryway here. And then along 3rd Street, you have access to the underground garage, along with the loading space functions for the building. And along Hennepin Avenue then is the porte cochere, and then the access drive to the underground garage for the valet operations component of the project. And this is an image then of what that building, the building, will look like. The applicant is appealing 2 conditions of approval and also the decision of Public Works staff to deny the porte cochere this morning. The applicant had originally appealed the 3rd condition relating to having an entrance for that branch bank within 60 feet of the intersection of Washington and Hennepin. However, they have withdrawn that aspect of the appeal as they have designed the site to meet that condition of approval. The conditions that are being appealed today, the first one is a condition number 3 for the conditional use permit, which is that no wall sign shall be located higher than 50 feet above grade. This is a plan that shows all of the signs that are proposed for the development. The sign that is being, or the condition that's being appealed is related to sign number 18 here facing South 3rd Street. This is a view of what that sign looks like. It's 120 square feet. The overall height is approximately 484 feet. Again, the maximum sign height is 50 feet. And here are some images of what that sign would look like at the top of the building. Reasons for the condition that were placed on the approvals is that the Minneapolis skyline does not have a proliferation of signage near the top of its tallest buildings, and allowing a sign at this height could be precedent setting and does not align with the sign adjustment criteria in the zoning code. It is true that the city has approved signs at the top or near the top of the buildings. However, none have been at 484 feet. The Wells Fargo signs that were approved as part of the Downtown East project had an overall height of 199 feet. The Lowe's Hotel sign is 229 feet, and the Ivy Hotel Zone signs are 295 feet above grade. The second condition that they are appealing is conditional use permit condition number 6, which states that the building shall be designed without the vertical vehicle ramp at Washington and Hennepin down to the below-grade parking at the north end of the Port Cochere and be replaced with a sidewalk and accessible plaza space. So again, just to orient you on the site, this is the Port Cochere, and then this is that vehicle entrance ramp. And the condition was that the Port Cochere could remain, but the entrance to the underground garage needed to be removed. So the building's been designed with the Port Cochere along Hennepin. That Port Cochere allows one to pull into the site and drop someone off, and then either enter or exit back onto Hennepin Avenue or enter the underground parking garage via that drive. CPED had recommended to the Planning Commission that the building be designed without a Port Cochere and therefore no access drive to the underground garage. The Port Cochere has been designed with two 12-foot wide curb cuts along Hennepin Avenue, and the width of the parking area in this space is 22 feet, which is the dimension that we require for a two-way drive aisle. So that would allow 2 lanes of cars to pull into and out of the site. Both Public Works and CPED have concerns about the Port Cochere on Hennepin Avenue and the impact that it will have. These concerns are based on observations at existing Port Cocheres in downtown. At peak times for hotel arrivals and departures or during large ballroom events, Port Cocheres tend to get congested with vehicles queuing out of the Port Cochere and obstructing the public right-of-way. We have taken some images from traffic cameras and other photos that show Port Cocheres, and I just want to show a few. This is the Hyatt Hotel. It has 645 keys. This was taken at 11:50 a.m. on Friday, October 12th. This is another picture that shows the cars in those Port Cocheres. This was taken this past Tuesday at the Lowe's Hotel. This is 251 keys, and there were 10 cars in the driveway. That was taken at approximately 11 a.m. on a Tuesday. And these are the Hilton Hotel, or this is the Hilton Hotel, excuse me. This was also taken around that same time on January 8th, so just this past Tuesday. So these are the observed concerns that staff has.
We have a question from Councilmember Goodman.
Mr. Mark, have the observed concern that those cars would just be on the street and in bike lanes, parking? I mean, people are going to get out at a hotel, so to assume that people aren't going to just do what they do, that also means we could have better regulation in that area. We certainly could have traffic control out there monitoring that. I mean, I'm confused about showing me those pictures gave me the idea that we would need a Port Cochere because otherwise those cars would be in the bike lane. Had you given that, or on Nicollet Mall where they're not supposed to be, or in the Lowe's situation in the bike lane? So I'm confused by that. Is your point that that would be better for them to be on the street? Because they're going to be there.
Correct. The point is that our hope would be that the site would be designed without a Port Cochere and with internal loading to the site or drop off to the site.
Okay.
So the city of Minneapolis is in the process of reconstructing Hennepin Avenue between Washington Avenue and 12th Street beginning in 2019, so beginning this year. This is the cross section for Hennepin Avenue reconstruction that has been approved by the city. It includes a 14-foot wide sidewalk, a furnishing zone, a 5-foot wide off-street bikeway, and 4 drive lanes. And at the corner of Hennepin and Washington, there will also be a left turn lane. The inclusion of a Port Cochere will have a negative impact on Hennepin Avenue, traffic flow, bicycles, and pedestrians. The Port Cochere will allow vehicles to cross over that off-street bikeway and sidewalk in this high-activity area not just once, but twice. The Port Cochere will also allow vehicles to pull in and wait for people either entering the building or leaving. The number of vehicles that can pull into the Port Cochere without blocking the sidewalk, the off-street bikeway, or the street is 5, 10 if both lanes of the Port Cochere are fully utilized and actively managed. So for those reasons, CPED had recommended that the building be designed without the Port Cochere. And the actions of the Planning Commission approved a building with a Port Cochere, but without the access drive to the underground parking garage. CPED agrees with the applicant that by eliminating the access drive to the underground garage, the negative impacts on Hennepin Avenue, the bike lanes, the bike traffic flow, and pedestrians would be exacerbated. If there is a Port Cochere, then there should also be an access drive to the underground garage. However, CPED does not think that there should be a porte cochere and therefore no access drive to the underground garage for the reasons already stated. The third item in the appeal is, the third item that is being appealed, by the applicant is regarding the decision of Public Works staff to deny the porte cochere, and that is through the preliminary development review or PDR process. And both Paul Miller and Alan Klugman from Public Works are here to speak to that. So I will step aside and let them discuss, and I'll be here for any questions.
All right, thank you.
Chairman Schroeder, members of the committee, my name is Paul Miller. I'm a project manager with the Transportation Planning and Programming Division in Public Works, and my role is a development coordinator representing the Public Works Department. My familiarity with this project goes way back, in fact, to December of 2014, so I'm very familiar with this project. I would like to say that Public Works' position on porte cocheres in general is we give these high scrutiny. They're generally not considered consistent with our complete streets policy and Access Minneapolis design guidelines. We're always going to work with the developer and their consultants to hopefully find alternatives to porte cochere access. On this particular project, our position and opposition to the porte cochere dates back to 2014. More recently, Hennepin Avenue has gone through a redesign process. The Hennepin Avenue redesign process made a concerted effort to do consolidation and elimination, if possible, of curb cut access to Hennepin Avenue, and I think we've been very successful with that. That was all with an intent to enhance pedestrian and bike safety along Hennepin Avenue. The porte cochere and Public Works position on this particular project supports the Hennepin Avenue design. I would also like to say that we do side with the applicant as far as we would not be approving of the removal of the ramp that would exacerbate the situation with the porte cochere in Hennepin Avenue. With that, I'm available for questions.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any questions. Oh, except for Councilmember Gordon.
I was just curious, and maybe you're not aware of this, but are there examples of hotels in Minneapolis that downtown, that don't have this kind of drop-off situation and that have solved the problem effectively?
I may want to defer to Alan on that, if you could. Chairman Tromer, Councilmember Gordon, I think Alan Klugman could answer that question better.
Yeah, because I'm trying to think of the downtown hotels and how it all works, and I know there might be. I think there's a couple that don't have it, and maybe they have curb cut other uses. But thank you.
Chairman Schrader, council members, members of the committee. Again, my name is Alan Klugman. I'm a traffic engineer with the Public Works Traffic and Parking Services Division. To the question about other hotels in downtown, we have a few different arrangements. Maybe I'll just talk through a few of those. We certainly have some that have what we would call a bay, kind of a cut-in, where the access is more parallel to the street. We also have others that are more maybe a courtyard type arrangement. For example, the new AC Hotel, which is right on Hennepin at 4th. Vehicles come in from Hennepin, go kind of internal to the project site, and then exit out to 4th Street. So that, again, there'd only be, in that case, there's only one driveway to Hennepin, and the staging and waiting and circulation takes place on site off of the public realm. One or two others that come to mind. The Minneapolis Hotel right nearby here, where again we come off 4th Street and the access is internal. And then finally with the porte cocheres that we do have, and as Councilmember Goodman noted, there's several of those, the distance of the porte cochere tends to be quite more generous so that there's less of a chance for cars to queue back and spill out of that realm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to note that just sitting here thinking about it, the Lowe's has one, the Hilton has one, the Radisson has one, the Hyatt has one. They all have porte cocheres, every one of them. All the competitive set hotels have them. Residents have them too. The Carlisle has one, Lat 45 has one. Even the Buckingham, owned by CCHT, an affordable housing project, has one. So it's not uncommon. And in most of those places, you have less interaction between people parking in the bike lane and people parking in a moving lane. than you would if there wasn't a porte cochere off the street.
Chairman Schroeder, Councilmember Goodman, I agree. There are numerous examples throughout downtown, as you pointed out. Again, from a public works standpoint, we do consider these to be disruptive to traffic, and there are always, I'll say, problems to be solved operationally, and we do always scrutinize these types of drop-off and valet porte cocheres as it relates to pedestrian safety. So we do put a lot of scrutiny into these proposals.
Thank you. I do want to point out you should not be parking in bike lanes. So just anyway, thank you very much. Got it. All right. Not seeing any other questions. Thank you very much. And at this point, I will open the public hearing, and I'll first give the applicant the opportunity to speak to the committee. Would the applicant or a representative be able to speak? And if you could state your name for the record.
Good morning, Chair Schroeder and council members. I'm Bill Catter with United Properties, 651 Nicollet Mall. I'm joined by Rick McKelvey, our lead developer of United Properties on this project, as well as other teammates, Leonard Smith of Smallwood Reynolds, our lead architect, and then both Tom Lincoln and Doug Arnold of Kimley Horn, who have done our engineering and traffic consulting on this project. As you know, we've already corresponded in a great deal about this project up to this point, and my intent here is not to rehash all of those comments here, but to selectively provide some additional context for your consideration, and then touch on a few of the key points here that we're talking about on this appeal. We hope that in doing so, it will provide clarity for you to make a final decision on these matters. Before I turn my attention to that, I wanted to acknowledge the great work that the city and our team and the city staff and the city leaders have done to get us to this point. This is a very exciting and very visible block, and there have been numerous challenges here, and it is important that we get it right, and the city has given us a significant amount of time on our redevelopment contract to get this right, and we are very appreciative of what you've done for us here. Every project does reach a point where a decision needs to be made, and we also recognize this is really your decision at this point. We have done everything we can here, we believe, to bring a great project forward. First, as a matter of context, when we initially responded to the city RFP, we were selected based on a number of considerations that were important to the city and really reflected your core values for this important block. Those are all outlined and are required in our redevelopment contract. The property had been a surface parking lot for many, many years, and to our knowledge, we were the only respondent to the RFP that responded and acknowledged and has brought forward all of the core values as outlined in your RFP. We agreed that these values will make the project great, and we did this because we, like you, recognize that this block is a gateway into the city of Minneapolis from other key districts. I'll specifically cover those key project values for you. The project must be a minimum of 30 stories. The project must have a mix of uses. Third, it must activate Hennepin Avenue and the corner of 3rd and Hennepin, as well as other street fronts with active uses. Fourth, it must place all parking below grade. Fifth, it must accommodate a future streetcar transit easement and system, which is an important element for the city as it continues to grow. Lastly, it must incorporate iconic design. We believe we've accommodated all of these requirements in our proposed development in front of you, and I'm going to touch on a number of key points here in more detail. Secondly, and additionally, for context, when we responded to this RFP, we at the time did not know the exact location or route of the transit easement through the site. Initially, we had favored Hennepin Avenue for that so that it did not significantly impact the site and constrain us on entry and access points to the site. About a year into the planning process, we learned that the only route for that streetcar system that the city could support would be across the eastern portion of the site, and that required us to focus on Hennepin Avenue as our front door. Initially, I have to say that I was reluctant to accept Hennepin as the front door of this project, but as time has come to pass, I really believe that that's actually one of the great things this project delivers on is a front door to help make Hennepin Avenue prominent again in a location where it needs it. And I really truly believe that in bringing a front door to this project at that key landmark corner, we have changed the block in a great way. I'm going to have Rick McKelvey place a site plan in front of you. Site plan, please. So with respect to the site plan, staff has covered the key issues here, but just to refresh, on the eastern part of the site, we have a transit easement that it will be in an interim of public park and plaza. Thanks, Hillary. On the north end of the site, we have Washington Avenue. We cannot take vehicles in the site and out on Washington Avenue because of the future streetcar transit route. On 3rd Avenue, we have a number of significant things happening for the building, the in and out ramp for the below grade parking and the loading functions of the building. We cannot bring a front door to the building on 3rd Street. At Left Hennepin Avenue is the front door. And the reality is that the site has challenges and constraints that we've worked with in arriving at the site plan in front of you today. I will note that with regard to the porte cochere, and I'll talk about this in a little more detail, we looked at a number of alternatives for coming in off Hennepin Avenue and exiting out on Washington Avenue, and it all crosses the streetcar transit future easement. It cannot be done. Subsequent to resolving the transit issue, we did take on the obligation to put the streetcar infrastructure into the foundation of our building at a cost of approximately $2 million. So we want you to know that we have taken that on in our balance sheet. Additionally, we took on the responsibility of connecting this property into adjacent properties through a skyway system at our cost, approximately $5 million. Those things were not known at the time of our response on the RFP, and they are now known and stay with us as our responsibility. As you also know, the proposed anchors for this project are RBC's Wealth Management U.S. headquarters, and they are here today to talk about the importance of this project to them. And it also brings a highly regarded Four Seasons hotel to the city of Minneapolis. And we think that these brands have special excitement for this project. RBC has a deep history in working with and within the city of Minneapolis. And we have the chance to capture their organizational growth. Not every organization is growing in our city, and this is one that is and is looking for a new home to do just that. We also have a chance to capture an internationally recognized hotel brand. And we think that's an important tool for our downtown and for the greater state of Minnesota to attract and retain tourist events and also attract national and international events to our city and state. That's a huge win in short. Turning our attention to the specifics of the appeal items today, I would like you to please consider the following relevant points. First, as you know, we've removed one item of appeal already. We'll cover that in a little further detail here. And that was the lack of access into the site off the intersection of Hennepin and Washington Avenue. We have now addressed that concern and removed our appeal. That leaves the first appeal item being the top of the building wall sign. At this point, I'll ask Rick to place a diagram up here. I want to just get in the record a number of important things. You've seen this, but I want to rehash them with you. Our project has been submitted as a PUD application, and under that process, the city has the flexibility to approve any number of things.
Oh, just 1 second. I have a question from Councilmember Gordon.
Oh, thank you. And I had a question when you were talking a little bit earlier about the hotel. And I think I really appreciate that a hotel has come back into the project, and I know that it wasn't there consistently. But I also recall that in the term sheet originally that we put out there when we were thinking of a hotel, we were talking about a labor peace agreement, and I'm just wondering if you've made any progress or what kind of discussions you've had in terms of with the hotel to make sure that they're going to be neutral in terms of organizing the labor force.
If I could, I'll address that at the end of my comments.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt your.
No, that's okay. The planned unit development should allow for a developer to gain flexibility on certain project components in exchange for providing a unique and attractive design to the city, and we believe this project has done it. Specifically, within the planned unit development ordinance, it allows the city to approve alternatives to the sign code if the developer is able to provide a minimum number of points, amenity points. 15 is that number, and this project delivered 17. So we believe we've earned the flexibility for signage here. I won't go over each of the points, amenity points that were earned here, but they are available if you have those questions for me. In addition, As you'll see now from this exhibit, and it may be a little hard to read here, but we submitted a sign plan that really only asks for about a third of the allowable signage on the overall project. And part of our ask was that in return for not cluttering the important intersection of Washington Avenue and Nicollet with a bunch of signage, that we trade some of that for a top-of-building sign. And the examples that the staff gave here are frankly all of top-of-building signage on the projects they mentioned. It just so happens that those projects are not as tall as this project, but we're asking for something very similar in terms of location at the top of the building facing just south. And I would like to note that the sign here that we have put forth is 8 times smaller than the signs that Wells Fargo put on their headquarters buildings over in downtown East. We fully understand staff's reluctance to create a precedent with this sign, but we do not agree that granting this condition sets a precedent for you because of the PUD context, the flexibility we've earned, and what you've achieved in return for providing us sign flexibility if you'll consider it. Therefore, approval of the top of the building wall sign does not create a new precedent. Existing buildings would need to go through a zoning change to PUD in order to even be considered for such flexibility, and they have no such basis for a rezoning request. And any new development would either need to have this approved under a PUD context, as we're asking for, or a conditional use permit, which in fact you just did grant for Thrivent Financial for their top of building sign. Lastly, on the issue of signage, RBC is here this morning to talk about how important this is to their decision to relocate. There have not been a lot of large-scale new office projects launched in downtown Minneapolis, and the reality of today's marketplace is that corporations are looking to partner with cities to elevate their brand recognition, and this is exactly that case. Secondly, with regard to the Port Cochere issue, first of all, as I said earlier, going back to the site plan here, we need a front door for the project. We've got some very exciting uses in this project, a world-class luxury office building, Class A office building for RBC and others. We have an exciting hotel brand here, and we have residences on top. And we wanted to concentrate these arrival points to one entry that can be shared, which we've done along Hennepin Avenue. I believe that we have enlivened Hennepin Avenue in a big way by providing our point of entry for the entire project there. There are many examples within Minneapolis of or variations of it for Port Cochere entries such as this, and I would like to point out a couple of key differences. First of all, ours is completely covered and under the superstructure of the building. It does not protrude from the structure versus all the examples that you've seen this morning. It's been integrated into our project design, and it's, as to the extent a drive lane can be fully screened, it is fully screened. The section between the arrival departure on Hennepin Avenue has a screen wall and landscaping in front of it, so it will not have the exposure that the other examples you've seen have. Examples were made of hotels that have Port Cocheres, and quite frankly, all full-service hotels in downtown Minneapolis have some sort of Port Cochere, or they have something very similar, which would be a drop-off and pickup zone with a curb cut. And we worked with staff and engineering and public works quite a bit here to make sure that we avoided a dedicated drop-off and pickup zone on Hennepin Avenue and integrated this project into the base of the building and screened it. There are other examples of projects that aren't hotels, and I think Councilmember Goodman has already touched on those, so I won't rehash them, but frankly, this is not an uncommon situation in downtown Minneapolis. It is our conclusion then that absent having a fully functional arrival point for the hotel, we cannot meet the minimum 30-story requirement, and that is why we are appealing this issue. As part of our Port Cochere functionality, you've heard from Public Works and staff that our site design incorporates a valet ramp that takes most of that traffic below the building. We feel it's very important to include that ramp, and one of the conditions placed on us earlier was to aesthetically improve the appearance of this building from the corner of Washington and Hennepin Avenue. This depiction shows that we have now covered as much of that ramp as we can possibly cover from the corner. It's become an extension of our public plaza to the northeast of the site, and it integrates a sidewalk from that corner leading into the lobby of the office building, from where you can then move into the hotel lobby and other parts of the building, the restaurant. So we believe we've addressed that objection. In consideration of the uses, the density, and the limitations of the site configuration, this is where we are at with this project, and we would ask your support of the porte cochere and the valet ramp in this location. We believe we've addressed Planning Commission's aesthetic objection, and we agree that the Planning Commission and Public Works and planning staff, that this intersection deserves something that we have addressed, we believe, appropriately. In our view, these appeal items are justified based on the circumstances already set in the city, the site development conditions and constraints placed on us in a redevelopment contract, and the values that are set forth for the redevelopment of this important block. We have also earned flexibility, we believe, for bringing forth something that exceeds the expectations initially set forth for this block in terms of minimum height and iconic design and the mix of uses. And we believe the city has reason to make findings that this project can proceed as designed. I would also like to thank the neighborhood group, the downtown business leaders, the downtown council, and the building trades and labor, who have all written letters of support for this project. In summary, United Properties has worked extensively with the city planning and engineering departments to move this project forwards, including meeting all of the conditions in the redevelopment agreement that make this project something truly unique for the city of Minneapolis. We believe that we are delivering a project that meets our collective vision for this block and activates north end of Nicollet Mall in a way that very few projects probably could. We've also accommodated an important transit easement route through the site, which is something very significant in the city's plans. And we have also reactivated Hennepin Avenue in an important manner here, which frankly is why we call this the Gateway Project. It is a gateway into the north end of the city and completes a transition from the North Loop in the Northeast District into the CBD district here. With respect to Councilmember Gordon's request about where we're at with labor and neutrality on the hotel. The fact of the matter is hotel feasibility and financing is the hardest single thing we've had to accomplish on this project. I'm not going to share the details with you. As it stands today, we have a financing commitment for the hotel, but what it has not introduced is operating as a union hotel. We have made a commitment to both Dan McConnell and Wade Lindbergh, who are both here, that if we're able to obtain a union investor to support the financing of the hotel, that we will agree to a neutrality agreement. And so that's where that stands today, and that's as transparent as I can be about that issue. So I hope that answers your question. With that, I'll turn it over for questions.
Thank you. I also want to thank Councilmember Fletcher for joining us. I don't know if now would be a good time if you have anything to say, or do you want to wait till later as we go through this? Okay, thank you. All right, with that, I will now open the public hearing. Please limit your comments to 2 minutes per person, which will be tracked by the timer near the clerk. Would any member of the public like to speak? And if you could state your name for the record.
Chair Schrader, members of the committee, my name is Corey Hepner. I'm a managing director and co-head of the affordable housing development business for RBC. So it's my pleasure to be here today, and I just want to say we are committed to maintaining our U.S. wealth management headquarters in Minneapolis, and we're really looking forward to this project. I want to underscore what Bill just got done running through with respect to the critical nature of the sign from a brand identity and development standpoint, the recruitment and retention of talent. I think we hear this time and time again in this market. There are a lot of great things and great reasons to come to Minneapolis. You know, we just came off of the Bold North branding, and we see that time and time again with the young people we're trying to recruit to come work for RBC, Global Financial Services Company. We've been in this community since 1909. We're looking forward to staying in this community and growing in this community. And the signage, as we've laid out as part of our lease with United Properties, is a critical component of that. We're a very strong supporter of the communities in which we live and work, and have contributed almost $3 million into this community over the last 2 years, including a lot of Minneapolis-based organizations, not only dollars, but volunteer time. And I think we are a top 10 employer in the great city of Minneapolis. I'm a 20-plus year resident of your ward, Chair Schrader, and really looking forward to United Properties continuing this project. And again, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. And thanks for living in Ward 11. All right. Anyone else interested in speaking? And if you can state your name and what wonderful ward you live in, that'd be great.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Steve Kramer, the Minneapolis Downtown Council, and I've said many times it's great that the 11th Ward finally has competent representation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. The history of this site goes back, speaking of my time here, back to that time. So it's not just the United Properties chapter, but it's a long history. And we're finally at a point where this site can be developed. And just quickly, the value of the project from a downtown business perspective, and I want to acknowledge that Mr. Weinhagen and I see this very similarly. It's kind of, Jonathan's given me his portfolio to speak on our collective behalf. Tax base expansion. I mean, downtown is 6% of the land area of the city, 40% of the tax base, and this will contribute to that. Job retention, as Corey just discussed. 5-star hotel, which our market lacks, but will be a huge benefit. Kind of building out the north end of Nicollet, privately owned public space, the plaza, which also accommodates the streetcar design. So many positives. As I said in my letter to you, what these appeals come down to in a simple way is weighing the key business imperatives of these tenants against kind of standard city policies. Standard city policies that have been varied already many times throughout our downtown, whether it's the signage, and I guess one perspective for me on signage, whether it's the RBC signage or drive-in, is that these companies want the world to know that they're in our downtown. And we should be happy that they want the world to know that they're in our downtown. We embrace historic signage. We embrace signage of all types. And I think that's reflective of this incredibly vital and vibrant downtown that we have in our hands these days. I should note that our organization's position on the RBC sign has been known now for a couple of months since the Planning Commission. I've gotten exactly one call from another business inquiring about, well, can we move our sign as well? And the answer is, you're not entitled to do it. You can apply, and you have to go through the same rigorous process that Mr. Catter outlined. So I think the concern about kind of proliferation is theoretical but not practical. And then finally, with respect to Hennepin Avenue, I have the greatest respect for our Public Works Department, and I've had the honor of serving on the steering committee for the Hennepin Avenue reconstruction project. The reality is that design, which you have approved, is a great design, and it's going to have to be varied in a couple of different places to accommodate commerce on Hennepin Avenue, and this is one of those examples, and I have absolute confidence in the problem-solving capacity of the department to solve that issue. So with that, I couldn't speak more strongly in favor of this project.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else interested in speaking? Anyone else? With that, I will now close the public hearing and see if I have any questions or comments from our colleagues. Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for letting me join in on these committee proceedings. I just wanted to express what I've heard from constituents in Ward 3, which is pretty overwhelming support, with a couple of exceptions. There's no unanimity on, lots of these things, but in general, the neighborhood's been very supportive. I think that it's important that we not allow this to become a sense of precedent setting. I don't want people to get a signal that they should all design porte cocheres. I don't think that's the direction we're going. In fact, I think we've heard quite the opposite as we're moving in a policy direction, trying to minimize curb cuts, trying to minimize points of conflict with pedestrian rights of way. I think at the same time, this project has developed in a way where this makes sense. It makes sense to complete this. It makes sense to get this project moving. And so I'm encouraging support. I'm also encouraging us to express generally as developers are beginning to envision projects that are at an earlier stage in the pipeline, to start really looking at our transportation planning and not assume that porte cocheres are going to be the direction that we're going moving forward. But that being said, I really appreciate the spirit of collaboration with the community that we've seen. I think it's very important if we're allowing a sign variance that it becomes a part of our skyline, it becomes a part of our identity, and so we really want to see the values of the building align with that identity. And so I think it's very important that we continue to see community investment, that we continue to see labor at the table with the projects inside. And so I appreciate the negotiations that have happened so far. I want to encourage that to happen, but I think the right thing here today is to grant these appeals and move this project forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to also have the record reflect that we've been joined by our mayor. Thank you. Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to move to grant each of the 3 appeals and direct staff to draft findings to support that recommendation, and I'd like to comment if that would be okay. First of all, I want to thank the mayor for being here. In 2001, when this site was in the 7th Ward, and it was for 10 years, we started the process of asking the Public Works Department along with the Intergovernmental Affairs Department to work with the federal government to eliminate what we felt was a blighted surface parking lot on this site. And it took the better part of 6 years for our Public Works Department to work out an agreement. In fact, it was so long ago that I see Carol Lansing in the audience, and I think she was the zoning administrator at the time that we were trying to make this happen. This has been something that the city has wanted to do in terms of development for the better part of 20 years. And I'll remind everybody that this isn't the first RFP that we went through for development of the site. In fact, I believe it's the 2nd or perhaps 3rd RFP that we went forward with. And during that period of time, many things changed. The mayor at the time, R.T. Ryback, decided we were going to have a streetcar. That then made the site even smaller. At the time, we determined that better greening and bike lanes on Washington Avenue made more sense, so we installed those bike lanes and upped the greening, making it more difficult to access Washington Avenue. During that time, the Federal Reserve Building sold the building across the street, and a park was developed on that site in cooperation with the city, as well as a 100-year land lease in order to ensure that that park made sense. And as Councilmember Fry came into office, we redeveloped Nicollet Mall and figured out a way to make Nicollet Mall not be a barrier between the streetcar site and plaza and the park across the street, but to allow it to become more focused and more of a collective site where pedestrians could be happy. So that is some of the context at which we sit here today. If this was an easy site to develop, it would have been done already. If anyone would have stepped forward to spend any money on this land, agree to all of the requirements that the city put in place, and they were noted by Mr. Catter, and they are many, we would have had something built here. And at this point in time, when we haven't seen a new Class A office building built in the city in my recent memory, to have any organization, including one as homegrown to us as RBC, move their headquarters to this site and build hundreds of thousands of feet of Class A office space, which I will note is taxed at the highest rate possible in the city, and still have them invest in the city and move to this location, I think is an incredible achievement, and it says something about the strength of the city. And our jobs as the leaders of the city is to ensure that we can make these things happen. And often that involves compromise. And sometimes it means we don't get everything we want, and sometimes the planning and the way that it's laid out isn't ideal. But in this particular case, I personally believe that the requests they're making are reasonable, given the site location. If we had not said we want a streetcar, if we had not put in a bike lane on Washington, if we had not added greening on Washington, if we had not said we wanted to have the residential lobby on the corner, we want a restaurant on Nicollet, if we hadn't listed all of these things, they maybe could have put their entrance somewhere else, but it just doesn't make sense at this late date. I'll lastly say, we're reconstructing Hennepin. And one of the things that's really bothersome to me is that we're not doing this part of Hennepin first. So what's going to happen, and it doesn't have to, is that we could do the north end of Hennepin first in conjunction with this development that will take multiple years, so that that part of Hennepin, not in my ward, but in Councilmember Fletcher's ward, and most of the time council members say, do me first. But in this case, I would say we should be thinking about how, as an enterprise, we can be better to this business and their $300 million development, and do that part of Hennepin first, so that when the hotel and RBC open, Hennepin is completed in that location in a seamless manner. We have the ability to do that. I have asked a number of questions about that. I have not gotten the answer that I would like to be getting from Public Works as it pertains to the timing of these projects, and I'm going to throw that out there now, because this is the kind of thing that people bring up when they say the city is not cooperative. This developer has been cooperative on a long laundry list of things that we've asked for, and now it's our turn to step up and make this dream a reality, as well as cooperate with them and get Hennepin Avenue done in a way that everything falls to place at the same time. Many of us might or might not be in office when this is finally completed, but it's something we can look back on and think about. Yet one more ugly surface parking lot in the center of downtown being redeveloped in a way that is sustainable and creates incredible economic value for our city. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Mr. Mayor, did you want to say anything, or?
Mr. Chair, I'll speak just briefly whenever works best for you. Is now a good time?
Certainly.
Thank you, the competent council member from Ward 11. I appreciate the time. Thank you, colleagues, as well, for your consideration on this very important issue. I will be as brief as possible, as two council members speaking in front of me, Councilmember Goodman and Councilmember Fletcher, articulated the reasons why I believe all three appeals should be granted, and I am supportive of all three appeals. As Councilmember Goodman mentioned, this is a project that has now spanned the life cycles of three different council members. First with Goodman to make sure that the parcel was set up and prepared for development someday. She mentioned the actual transfer of land and rights over the parcel. The RFP was issued somewhere in the range of 4.5 years ago, and Councilmember Fletcher has now done a really wonderful job in bringing it finally to fruition. This is a gateway, as was mentioned, not just really to downtown, but to the entire western half of the country, Hennepin Avenue being the first bridge to cross the river. And it is a parcel that deserves to be highlighted. And an extraordinary amount of work has gone into highlighting it. It wasn't just an RFP that was issued saying, do what you want with the land, and we, the city, are out. There were a number of both restrictions as well as clear visioning that was set to what would happen as far as the building goes, which is an impressive design. The uses within the building, from hotel to commercial to residential space, to the public realm, which is perhaps what I'm most excited about, and the possibility of connecting Cancer Survivors Park, which is indeed a public space but is not utilized that way, down to the street and then across to the public realm improvements in the Nicollet Hotel parcel, is something that I think could really be an incredible final product for our city. I appreciate all of the work that has been done, both by our city staff as well as the from RBC to Four Seasons to United Properties. I appreciate the council members' work on this, and I appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any other comments? Council President Bender?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just briefly want to echo, I'm glad Councilmember Gordon asked about the status of the labor agreement. I think that's a really important priority for just our values as a city. I do want to make a motion to add a fourth condition of approval under item 2.1 in consultation and coordination with staff. And this should just reemphasize what would probably happen anyway, but that would be to add a condition that says the development team will work with CPED and Public Works to design the porte cochere in a manner that prioritizes safety for pedestrians, bicyclists, and traffic. So I'm supportive of the motion made by Councilmember Goodman. I think this addition will help us make sure that as the final details get developed in coordination with staff, that wouldn't come back to this body or anything, just in coordination with staff, that we're keeping those policies in mind. And I think, just to comment on that, by the time these large complex projects get to us as a council, it's hard for us to go in and, tweak a specific design detail without really affecting the whole project. So I'm supportive of this project, and I think, this will help us make sure that this element of it is designed in a way that really is consistent with contributing to the pedestrian realm and the safety of everyone using this important block. And I echo the excitement about using this as one opportunity to really make sure that Hennepin Avenue is a place that we can all be proud of. And I mean, it's wonderful that we have this space on Nicollet Avenue, but part of it, in some ways, it sort of sucks all the life out of the roads around it. And I'm excited about all of us working together to really enliven this really important transit corridor. Of course, the reconstruction coming will help, and this building will be a really important anchor to that. that. So I'm excited as well about the opening out onto Hennepin Avenue. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
You could take that motion like before the other.
Yeah, I was going to check with the clerk, but that works. Councilmember Ellison?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did want to kind of lean into Councilmember Gordon's point. I wasn't all that satisfied with the answer to the question regarding labor neutrality, and it kind of felt like it amounted to, well, building a hotel is really hard, which I'm sure it is, but I wondered if you could maybe clarify the you all stance, or where you all stand with coming to that agreement or working your way to that agreement. Yeah, that'd be really helpful.
Councilmember Ellison, thank you for raising that point. So to be clear, the project will be constructed with all union labor. I think, is that part of your question you're asking? And then secondly, with respect to the hotel operations, I think you're asking, the best way to say this and the most transparent I can be is that my first order of business, if this project is approved, is to make sure I have financing to build it. And at the moment, it's not clear to me whether I can get financing by agreeing to a neutrality agreement. It's not clear that it's not. The redevelopment contract requires we use good faith efforts to finance it and to agree to incorporate labor into the union labor into the hotel operations, and we're doing just that, and I assure you of that.
Thank you. That's incredibly helpful.
Yeah.
Councilmember Gordon?
Thank you very much, and I appreciate all the comments, and I'm supportive of the motions. I also really appreciated the presentation. I thought it was very clear, and I think I understood everything that you said accurately. And one of the things that I thought that I heard was that the third appeal item was withdrawn, and that condition was something that the project was going to go forward on, and then it sounded like the motion included all three conditions. So I just want to get clarity on that. We're just dealing with the first two.
Mr. Clerk, is that true that we're doing the first two plus Council President Benders?
So, Mr. Chair, my understanding is that 2.1.3 was withdrawn. So the appeals in front of you are 2.1, 1 and 2, and 2.2, which is the port cochere at the bottom.
Thank you. Not see, Councilmember Gordon, you have any follow-up?
No, so I think that's pretty clear with everybody. We're talking about the sign, and we're talking about the access to the underground parking that gets to be included in the drop-off area, and we're not talking about the other item. Thank you for the clarification.
Can you speak into the mic? Or, never mind. Thanks. All right, not seeing anyone. I do have a couple comments. I myself am, it's been a long road, but I'm supportive of the project. I do have, there's a lot of things that are concerning for me. And you talked a lot about I am worried about this creating precedent. I understand the argument that this would not, but in the process of going forward to help developments going, I thought it'd be helpful to kind of go through where my kind of concerns stem from. Kind of first and foremost, seeing this at Planning Commission, there was not as much a conversation about the sign. And at Planning Commission, we have a lot of expertise that we could have that discussion. And I really would have liked to have a more robust conversation. We had a very robust conversation about the port cochere, but not as much on the sign. So I think for me, the reason that's a big deal is that if you're asking to have something that's going to be a part of the Minneapolis skyline, I want it to represent the Minneapolis identity. Things that show that if you're that company and you're building a building, are you building that building sustainably? What kind of long-term environmental effects are you thinking about? Are you thinking about who's going to work there? Are those union jobs? And just make sure that this is going with the identity of the city. That said, I do appreciate how much the applicant's been willing to work with the city and work with City Council. I do believe it's a beautiful building. And with that, I will actually go forward with Councilmember Goodman's two motions and the Council President's motion. Can we do that as one vote? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? The ayes have it, and that motion carries. We'll now move on to number 4, which is the consideration of conditional use permit and site plan review appeal submitted by Figgery Baker Daniels regarding the project at 4757 Hiawatha Avenue. We'll start with the staff presentation.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. The application before you is for a project known as Hiawatha Avenue Apartments, located at 4757 Hiawatha Avenue in the 12th Ward. The applicant is appealing two of the applications to allow for a new 85-unit, 6-story multiple family residential building. On December 3rd, 2018, the City Planning Commission, notwithstanding the staff recommendation, denied 2 of the 3 requested applications. The first application is a conditional use permit to increase the maximum height from 2.5 stories, not to exceed 35 feet, to what was an amended plan shortly before the Planning Commission, which came out to 6 stories, 85 feet. The City Planning Commission approved the variance, so that is not an application before you today. And then they also denied the site plan review. The project as proposed has 3 points of height. Why that's relevant is because in the shoreline overlay, we don't measure height just to the roof deck, but to the highest point. So just to call out the different sections that would be relevant to the application before you today is the roof parapet is proposed now at 69 feet 9 inches approximately. There was a new canopy added to the roof deck. There's a roof amenity for residents that measures to 76 feet 7 inches, and then to the top of the elevator and stair overrun is 85 feet. The staff report had recommended an alternative to what the applicant had originally proposed at 5 stories, not to exceed 70 feet, and then also to allow for that roof element for the penthouse, not to exceed 85 feet. At the Committee of the Whole for the City Planning Commission on September 30th, 2018, the Planning Commission asked that the applicant be prepared to provide information specific to views from the Minnehaha Creek. And so the applicant included that in the packet, and I would say that was probably the most relevant information which lent the City Planning Commission to overturn the staff recommendation and to deny those 2 applications. So this was included in the packet, and it includes views as shown by the applicant for the proposed structure. So I've tried to highlight kind of in the red boxes because they're a little hard to see, but hopefully a little bit better in your packet, some of the views from the Minnehaha Creek. The City Planning Commission and staff have both commented that the project was more visible than we had initially expected at the Committee of the Whole. Here are some additional views from the creek. And then finally those. So the City Planning Commission, on a vote of 4-3, denied the conditional use permit to increase the maximum height based on the following findings. 1, that the proposed height does not meet the intent of the Shoreland Overlay District, and 2nd, that the proposed height would have a significant visual impact. For site plan review, the denial of the conditional use permit to increase the height related to the site plan review, and therefore the site plan review could not be approved as proposed. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. One thing I just wanted to verify, I remember from the Planning Commission, one of the critiques was that a lot of the pictures provided were not of winter because everything had leaves, so it didn't really give kind of the full view of what that building's impact would be.
That's correct, and we did not receive any additional information with the appeal packet, but the applicant did their best to really kind of show the outlines at the time that they took the photographs, which was early fall.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to clarify and reiterate, staff had a recommendation of an alternative that would comport to existing regulations at the 70-foot.
Staff had a recommendation of 5 stories, and the way that we got to 70 feet is the same way that we arrive at stories in feet in the other zoning districts, and that is to multiply the maximum height of a floor, which is 14 feet, by the number of stories. So in this case, 14 times 5 equals 70. So the staff recommendation essentially was to 5 stories, 70 feet. The applicant has proposed less than 70 feet to the top, but a 6-story building, just for clarification.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Not seeing any other questions. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much.
Oh, sorry. Do you spoke to some Council President there?
I think, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think what I want to make is more of a statement, but I welcome any response you might have as staff. I think in speaking with Councilmember Johnson's office, often when we're considering a CUP for height, it's within the context of the design of the building overall. And so, is the height increase, does the design of the building mitigate the height increase, or how does the design of the building with that height fit into the context, including the natural environment here that we have in this context? So I just want to make that point, that I think sometimes the question about how tall should a building be is in part about the overall design of the building and how that height is mitigated or not, and how it fits into the context or not, which is reflected in our policies.
Yes, I would agree.
Well, thank you.
Thanks very much.
At this point, I'll open the public hearing, and I'll give the applicant the first opportunity to speak to the committee. If it's representative, if you wouldn't mind saying your name for the record.
Good morning, council members. Carol Lansing, Fagry Baker Daniels. I'm representing the applicant here. I'm going to talk about the Shoreland Ordinance, the intent, and some precedents and policies for you to consider, and Kyle Brasser with Reuter Walton is going to address in more detail those view considerations. So the crux of your decision today, as I see it, is whether you are going to give priority to preservation of the status quo or to the development policies that have been adopted by the City Council that call for change and for the increased density and height on the Hiawatha corridor that we're proposing. Staff recommended, as Shanna indicated, a building height of 5 stories and 70 feet. They did not recommend denial, and they indicated that that height would still be visible from the creek. We're asking, as she said, to comply with the staff recommendation of 70 feet, but to allow 6 stories. We don't feel that there's a difference in visual impact based on the number of stories. And really what we're talking about today, what the concerns expressed have been about visual impact. On a split 4-3 vote, the Planning Commission determined that the proposed height didn't meet the intent of the Shoreland Ordinance because of the visibility of the structure. And looking back at the Planning Commission meeting, what I realize now is that CUPs have been approved for many projects of 6 stories or more in the shoreland since the adoption of the overlay, but that 3 of the 4 commissioners who voted against the height were not on the commission during the times that most of those projects have been considered. And we did not address this issue as proactively with them in that consideration of that as we should have. So I have on the overhead the purpose statement of the shoreland overlay with some underlining. The intent is to preserve and enhance the environmental qualities of the water and the natural and economic values of shoreland areas within the city, and to provide for efficient and beneficial utilization of shoreland areas. The shoreland area is not just the creek, it's not just the water. So this policy says we need to consider, as well as the natural characteristics, the economic and use aspects of those areas in the shoreland that our policies intend to promote. Some of the precedents, most recently, of 6 stories or more are mostly outside of the downtown. There's many, but mostly they're on Lake Street, which has historically been a developed and more active corridor than Hiawatha has been. But it is more what Hiawatha is intended to become. The 6-story Edgewater was quite controversial, but I think people, it's on the shores of Badea-Makaska, think it's quite attractive and a benefit to the area now. More recently, an 8-story lake residence was approved that's within the shoreline of both Lake of the Isles and Badea-Makaska, and is very visible from Lake Badea-Makaska. And most recently, a 9-story building was approved a little further away on Lake Street, but still in the shoreland. And as I said, commissioners on the commission today were not participants in the discussion of those projects and how height in the shoreland, but also in areas like this, urban corridors, has been approved. The shoreland standards don't require that a building be invisible. It seeks to limit visibility, but you have to consider that mitigation both in context of the natural environment, the existing character, but also the context of, as I've been indicating, what policies for development apply to the surrounding area. I also have on this overhead some the key policies. Under the currently applicable plan, the Minneapolis Plan for Sustainable Growth, note that both Hiawatha and Minnehaha Avenues are community corridors. The project site is in an activity center, and most importantly, it's within the 46th Street transit station area. All of those current policies support increased height, even with the overlap of the shoreland. Then we also have the 2040 plan, and I have been focusing a lot on the future because this is a first project in an area for which development is sought. And if you stick to the status quo, if you say the existing character of the area is short, then you'll never get what you're looking to achieve. This is an aerial of what you've got now. This is the project site. This is a site where the 70-foot cap apartments is being developed. It's just outside of the shoreland, but that's also 70 feet. And this area is Hiawatha. You've got your surface parking lot, you got your strip centers of 1 and 2 stories. So yes, this six-story building will be out of character with the existing development, and that's a good thing. This is the 2040 plan and what you want to see. Sorry, I'm so old school. This is an X marks the spot of the project site, and all of this turquoise is guided transit 10. So instead of surface parking strip malls, you want transit 10, and all of this area is also within the shoreland. We're not talking about just affecting one corner project site. We're talking about this entire area from 46th to the Greenway there, or the lake. I also wanted to note for you that other areas, which are these areas here, north of the creek and south of 46th, are also guided for height more than 2.5 stories. They're guided for 6 and 4. And other areas around the site are guided for 6 and 4. So the goal is for this not to continue to stick out as the only building of that height and seem out of character, but to become the character. So in closing on my remarks, unless there's questions, it does not violate the shoreland ordinance to allow heights of this type where it's within the urban context. And if you have no questions for me, or if you do, Kyle will come up.
Nope. Thank you. I'm not seeing any questions.
All right.
Good morning, council members. My name is Kyle Brasser, and I represent the developer, Ryder Walton Development, on this project. As Carol outlined before me, we are asking that the committee please grant our appeal to approve a conditional use permit and site plan approval as outlined in the handout that she provided. At our planning commission hearing, planning staff recommended the approval of a nearly identical CUP, the one exception being the 6 stories versus 5 stories. But the CUP that we have in front of you today has the exact same height parameters as included in that. And we ask that it be approved to contain 6 stories versus 5. Within the shoreline overlay, it seems that height should be the guiding factor as opposed to the number of stories, as it is height that affects the massing of the building and how it's viewed from the creek in this case. I would also just like to note, and I'll point this out on a drawing later, Shannon made a comment that we added a rooftop trellis structure. That has been in our proposal since the time of committee of the whole. I don't know where that disconnect came from, but that has been in our proposal. I think in terms of the height of the building, it's really important in looking at the context of it from the creek, and so I would like to dive in a little bit more deeply into the views exhibit that was referenced earlier. All right. So this is a site aerial. Our project is right here, and along the western portion here is the creek. we took photos from all of these different locations where these arrows are located, and the direction of the arrow views shows the direction of the photo that was taken. The numbers are nearly impossible to read on the screen, but I want to point out arrow number 1 and arrow number 5, because those are on either side of the land bridge and also closest to Hiawatha and the traffic on the land bridge, and they're the most urban points of the creek, and I think that's relevant when discussing the context of this site. So on the next page, I will get into the individual views, which I know you saw briefly earlier. This first picture here, this is the image of the building from the creek from point 1, which is just south of that land bridge in the most urban, one of the most urban settings. The building is visible. There is foliage blocking it partly. It was noted that these were not taken in the dead of winter. However, they also were not taken at the time of year when foliage was thickest. This was at the end of October. I think it's worth noting, especially in some of these later pictures, you'll see how thin some of the foliage is. So it's quite I think it's a more representative time of year as opposed to taking it when everything is as thick as it could be. So as we move south, then we have view number 2. And again, we've outlined the building here because without having done so, you couldn't see the building. View number 3 and 4 over here are the same things. So as soon as we move immediately south into the more vegetative and natural portions of the creek, the building is no longer visible. Then we start north of the land bridge, and we have something similar. We have an image of that view today and an image below of a view with our building. This I actually feel is the most urban portion of the creek, where we have overhead power lines which aren't very visible on this image, but they're there. There are transformers, telephone poles, and other things like that, and even the single-story strip center is visible. Also, in the future, as Carol referenced, there will be a 70-foot building constructed kind of on the northern portion of the site here. It's not visible at this point, but it's currently under construction. And then as you move north from the land bridge, again, we have images of our building, or I should say outlines of our building, as it really cannot be viewed as you move away into the more natural portions of the creek. So that concludes my presentation regarding the height of the building. Again, we're asking for the approval of a conditional use permit that is nearly identical to what was recommended for staff approval at the Planning Commission hearing, and also the site plan approval with all of the conditions that were recommended at Planning Commission as well. I'm happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you. Not seeing any. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
At this point, I'll open the public hearing. Please limit your comments to 2 minutes per person, which will be tracked at the timer by the clerk. Would any member of the public like to speak? Anyone interested in speaking on this issue? All right, not seeing anyone, I will now close the public hearing. Look to see to my colleagues if there are any discussion. Not seeing any, I'll entertain a motion from any of my colleagues. Council President Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to move to deny the appeal. While I appreciate the reference to our long-term policies, I really don't feel compelled to disagree both with the staff recommendation and the findings of the Planning Commission, particularly given, as the chair referenced earlier, just the expertise and the Planning Commission and their ability to take a lot of time with each project. I do think the combination of design and height is important here. And so that's part of, I think, why I'm making the motion that I am, that it's not just the height, but the height in coordination with the overall design of the building.
Thank you. Anyone else? Before I just explain a little bit, I think the reason this is a little bit more difficult is right on the transit. And so while listening to, there's all the issues with the Planning Commission brought up, and I appreciate everything that the applicant has brought up. I mean, I think we'll now take the motion, President Bender's motion. All those in favor of...
Mr. Chair, could we just get some clarification?
Sure, certainly.
Staff, we're a bit confused. Again, if Shanna could explain, the staff recommendation was to approve, right? Planning Commission denied.
That is accurate. So staff had an alternative recommendation, to be fair to the applicant. The applicant had originally requested 6 stories, and I think it was something like 86 feet, 9 inches to the top of that roof of the stair tower. So staff had an alternative recommendation, kind of calling out the heights more specifically, but we did make findings to approve the conditional use permit and site plan review.
Thank you.
I apologize. So then I'll amend my motion then, and so I'll withdraw my motion. I'll withdraw and remake my motion just to be totally clear that my motion is to deny the appeal. Then to clarify my reasoning, it was to stay in line with what the Planning Commission discussed in their decision to deny this, the additional height here.
Thank you for that clarity. Not seeing any other comments from my colleagues. Council President's motion is before us. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and that motion carries. We'll now move on to item number 5, which is the consideration of conditional use permit variance and site plan review for appeals submitted at 4040 Washington LLC regarding the project at 4040 and 4050 1/2 Washington Avenue North. And we'll begin with the staff presentation.
Good morning, Chair Schrader, committee members. The appeal before you is related to the properties of 4040 Washington and 4050 1/2 Washington Avenue North. The appeal is a decision of the Planning Commission decision to deny a conditional use permit and site plan review to allow a towing service, as well as a variance for surfacing requirements. And this is an appeal of the original applicant. So just some background for the site. The zoning of the site is I2. It's also in the Mississippi River Critical Area Overlay District. This area has a history of being mostly industrial. The site here has an existing building, and then you can see the buildings around it, railroad corridors. Then as you move to the east, you have the North Mississippi River Park, and the park board does own this property here, and they're currently using it as a maintenance facility. And then of course we have the river a little further east. So there's also, I should note here, an access easement that provides access along the back to the river properties. So on this existing site, there's actually currently a towing service there that was approved in 2014. But they just occupy the property of 4040 Washington. This 4050 Washington parcel, which is pretty much, it runs along the boundary of the railroad corridor, but does not include these grain elevators. That has been newly acquired by the applicant just this year, or last year now. So it's unapproved, but it has access to that access easement. The proposal, as indicated, by the applications, is to use this area behind the 4040 Washington building for temporary storage or leasing it to a towing service to temporarily park cars. They approximated 150 cars could be located back there. And this site plan on the left is what was reviewed by the Planning Commission. So at that time, they had not proposed improvements other than putting a fence around the easterly boundary of the site to give it definition. And then on the right here is the updated plan that's been submitted for this appeal. So you can see they are proposing some landscaping along the perimeter. And then they are proposing to add paving here, and the applicants indicated that's asphalt. The applications that are needed for this proposal were the CUP for the towing service, long site plan review, and then the variance of the parking, of the surfacing requirements for the parking, where the parking would be located, which has now been mostly eliminated except this area here north of the building. Some cars have been parked there before, so that's why it's still included. Looking at the Planning Commission decision, they did adopt the staff recommendation to deny these applications, and there were two main reasons in the staff findings for the denial. The first being that the proposal is inconsistent with the comprehensive plan, and the proposed site plan would not comply with the site plan review standards. So looking at our comprehensive plan policies, it's guided for mixed use on the site and the surrounding area. A towing service is a type of use that's not supported by the comprehensive plan. It has low job density and is associated with adverse visual impacts. This site is located within the boundaries of 2 small area plans above the falls and the Mississippi River critical area plan. So in the above the falls plan, it calls for this industrial area to be transitioning from industrial to mixed use. It does recognize that this transition is probably not going to happen for another 10 years, and that short term will remain industrial. So for that short term, it provides some guidance for supporting those interim industrial uses, that they should be compatible with the river, that they should create positive economic development, and also results in improvements to the character of the area. So for this type of use, your main impacts would be environmental and public realms. So looking at this site, there are opportunities to implement sustainable stormwater management solutions, doing public realm improvements adjacent to Washington, and looking at any potential screening that can be done for views from the river. And the site plan review standards would help with meeting some of those improvements. Excuse me. So staff and the Planning Commission did find that this is not consistent with the comprehensive plans because it's not meeting that short-term guidance, and also is not meeting site plan review standards, which is that second main reason for denial. So there was no changes to the building proposed. So we're really looking at the area, the rest of the site around the building, and needing to be brought up to compliance with the site plan review standards. And the applicant did ask for alternative compliance of reduction of impervious surfaces, looking at the general landscaping requirements for the site, overall landscaping, trees and shrubs, and so on. And then specific parking and screening requirements, as well as not proposing any curbing around the parking. As you can see with the updated plan, they did add more landscaping, and that still didn't eliminate the request for alternative compliance, so that there's a little bit more landscaping, but they still need the alternative compliance. So looking at the requirements and why we have them, we're looking at compatibility with natural areas such as the river, small area plans, and reducing heat island effect, and then visually enhancing the development. We didn't find that those conditions had been addressed for the reasons I had mentioned, and that they're not meeting the criteria for alternative compliance, and that it would be feasible to make some more improvements and be more consistent with adopted policies of the plan. Yeah, and that's why the recommendation was to deny. With the conditional use permit, most of the findings could not be met as well for those reasons. And then going to the variance, which I mentioned is largely not needed now, we still did not identify a practical difficulty. So I'll leave with the final Planning Commission decision. They did unanimously deny the conditional use permit and site plan review, and there was 7-1 on the variance. But they did give the applicant some direction, saying that more consideration needs to be given to meet the intent of the ordinance and the requirements, but they could consider some alternatives. So I believe that's why the applicant did come in with an alternative plan, and they are here today as well. That concludes my presentation. I can take any questions.
Thank you. I'd like to recognize Councilmember Wright.
Will there be a public hearing?
There will. Did you want to talk after that?
Yes, please.
Okay, thanks. Councilmember Ellison.
Just so we avoid the confusion of the last item, this was both proposed for recommended denial by staff and the Planning Commission.
That's right.
Okay, cool. Just.
All right, thank you very much. At this point, I'll open the public hearing, and I'll first give the appellant the chance to speak. Is there an appellant here? Thank you. If you can come forward and say your name for the record.
Good morning. My name is Kathy Osborne. I work for the owners of 4040 Washington, LLC. We're just trying to use our property. We bought this small piece of property that's behind our property. So as was stated, this is an industrial site, and industrial sites are really getting scarce in the city right now, especially with the new Above the Falls project. That whole area along Washington is going to go away. That area has been industrial from the beginning. The city has been here, and as you see on the map, it's still all industrial. It's the city itself owns an industrial property right behind us, between us and the river. We just want to use our property for our use and for our tenants' use, and we know that the future is going to change. If you're going to put the amphitheater for phase 1 for Above the Falls, things are going to change, but we want to use our property now. We originally did not approve to pave that area because personally I don't think it's appropriate to pave that close to the river. I mean, it's basically a hard pan gravel or dirt along there. You're not going to get items really soaking in that well. We're behind the railroad track, so our elevations are lower. Surface water is not going to flow directly to the river from our site. And if you look at that photo, the area that the city is operating is all unpaved and unforested, grassed, whatever. It's all open right next to the river. And our site is so small, I don't know how we would be impacting the greater benefit, and especially if you're going to change the whole thing within 10 to 15 years or whatever anyway. We also had offered to provide funds for additional trees or other plantings in a future park, because the little site, it's less than a quarter of an acre behind us. To put 20% landscaping along there kind of takes away the whole usefulness of, it makes the size of the property that much smaller to be able to maneuver. So that's why originally we didn't offer to put landscaping back there. We are, with the new site drawing that she has on, I don't know if you see this on your computer as well, we'll put the little soldier arborvitaes around there to try to screen it. But, there are a lot of buildings around here. You really don't have direct site views from the river because the building that the city owns right behind us. And if you're worried about the people to the north, well, it's all forested, and there's a fence along there too. So nobody to where that forested area is going to be able to see our site as well. There's other industrial businesses that are all along there. They use that same access road that we might use to get behind there. So I guess our appeal is, and our request of you is just, we would like to use this small piece of property to basically expand, which does offer jobs or expands our business and allows us to operate additionally at that site.
Thank you. Councilmember Goodman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just confused. Are you guys a towing company?
No, we're leasing it to a towing company.
Right, so you're not really expanding for your own business. You wanted to start another different business.
No, we can use, Atomic Recycling is also part of our family of companies. So if we use it as a storage area, it's my understanding that we're allowed to put our dumpsters back there. So we can either, if we can't put cars back there, we'll put our dumpsters back there.
But you're not a towing company?
No, Corky's Towing right now is who is leasing the property from us.
I mean, what I kind of hear staff saying is you can use the property for your business, but we don't want you creating a whole nother business that's auto-centric in this location. But maybe staff, am I wrong? Do I have this completely
Well, 4040 Washington is leased by a towing company, and there's a little bit of space behind the building to park cars, but this 40/50 and a half is adjacent right to that and just gives a little bit more room for maneuvering.
Got it, I think.
Yeah, if staff could give a little more clarity. Thank you.
Yes, the industrial use or district that this site is located in does allow for a variety of industrial uses, but when we have an auto-oriented use, there are additional requirements that go along with that. So by not meeting that, we would be saying it would not be appropriate to allow this use.
Thank you. Well, at this point, I'll open the public hearing. Please limit the comments to 2 minutes per person, which will be tracked by the timer by the clerk. Would any member of the public be interested in speaking? All right, since we know everybody in the room, I'm going to assume no one else wants to speak, and we'll close the public hearing. I'd like to recognize Councilmember Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I think I concur with staff on this one, but I do want to make a couple clarifications. One, as we contemplate what, well, actually, we're eliminating the whole term industrial. We now have protected production and processing. And in our mixed use areas, before the 90s version of the mixed use meant, sort of a coffee shop with some senior housing above, that sort of thing. Now we're talking about mixed uses in a much more robust sense. Another clarification, technically it's still the above the falls plan, but it had a significant amendment that was branded River First. And to this day, people refer to the old plan and say we should be following the old plan, when clearly both our direction as policy and Park and Rec's direction is ensconced in both our 2040 plan and in the rebranded River First plan. And that contemplates these mixed uses. And it also strongly contemplates that areas that would formerly be called industrial are not just areas where we put aside because they're unsightly or create pollution, but we actually want to create places that create jobs, and we judge them by their ability to create jobs and their low impact. We have a dual purpose, and that's not being accommodated by what's being proposed here. So I think staff has it right with existing plans, but it certainly has it right looking forward to how we contemplate both the River First area and how we contemplate mixed use as a robust area for both housing, commercial, and hopefully production and jobs. And with that, I'll move to deny.
Councilmember Ellison.
Didn't have a ton to say. Just wanted to say that I do empathize with the business owner just trying to, make use of your property. But when we've got sort of the analysis from staff and from the Planning Commission, I think that it's clear, and I will speak, on behalf of one of the representatives of the North Side. I think that we want to not set this precedent that it's we're going to have a hard standard everywhere else in the city, and the North Side is the Wild West, right? Like we need to be meeting these standards, and so I really appreciate everything else that Councilmember Wright had to say, and I will support his motion.
All right, with that, Councilmember Reich's motion is before us. Does staff need any clarity on that? Are we good? All right, well, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the motion carries. Seeing no further business before us, this committee is adjourned.